When Little Big Planet 2 came out, it introduced a whole nother realm of logical capabilities. Now we had microchips, we had cables, we had different ways that we could program logic in a not physical space. So we didn't have to rely on physics in order to make everything work. We could have everything work in real time, but separately from our physical creations. There were also cameras and different ways you can tweak effects and other physical properties, and just a whole robust range of things you could do. It really was a level up from Little Big Planet 1, and with all that, I created absolutely nothing. Little Big Planet 2 is one of my favorite games of all time, and the tools that they introduced were revolutionary for me. And I guess I just had trouble finding the right ideas, and it's one of my fatal flaws is that I don't like to create anything unless I feel like I have something to say. I have to feel like the experience is meaningful and really worth experiencing, which I guess makes it good that I'm not one of these slop assholes who just asset flip something and put it out there with no real intent or artistic pride or whatever. But it does make it hard to create when you're constantly getting on your own ass about whether it's worthwhile or not in some deeply human sense. When Little Big Planet 3 came out, it introduced more tools, but like I said, Little Big Planet 3 it was made by Sumo Digital, and I didn't like the game as much as Little Big Planet 2, and I felt like it took a lot of steps backwards in a sense. They introduced new character archetypes and more dimensions to work with, which on paper is a really good thing. They also added to the tools that Little Big Planet 2 had, and I tried to make something work. Like, I would focus on creating different characters. I had this character named Destel who could control gravity. I had another character who could make decoys and phase through solid matter, and this decoy ability is one that I would eventually end up using for the Rite of Spring. I had another character who I started making in Little Big Planet 2, I believe, who could control fire and water, and I was trying to develop some puzzles around that, but I just never did it. I never finished that idea. Destel was the closest thing I had to a functional game object, and I just couldn't find a way to flesh an entire game or world around her mechanics. So my ideas for video games kind of fell by the wayside. Seemingly out of nowhere at E3 2015, what a different time it was back then, Media Molecule would unveil Dreams, an all-new creation platform much more focused, more accessible, and larger in scale than anything that came before. Dreams isn't just a game, it's a universe. Well, you know, technically speaking, it's a game engine, but what sets it apart from other tools like Unreal or Unity is that, well, firstly, it's a PlayStation exclusive, though I'm kind of surprised they haven't ported it to PC yet, and I would really like them to do so, because not only would it breathe life into the game again, it would also make it more accessible just in general. But secondly, Dreams is its own collaborative ecosystem. On the individual side, there are many tools for automation, procedural animation like walking and running, easy sketching, and music performance and production tools, and a lot of the same but expanded preset logic gadgets that we saw back in Little Big Planet 2. Dreams allows you to sketch an idea and bring it to life without having to dig through the weeds of code and programming languages. If you want a character to walk forward, it's as simple as plugging and playing. But that simplicity snowball gives way to an avalanche of complexity if you allow it to. On the communal side, if I want, say, a character model of Freddy Fazbear, I can just search for it, select the one I want, and plop it into my level because someone's already made it. And there's no monetization model here. Outside of the price of the game, money is not exchanged. Dreams understands in a very anti-capitalist way that when people have the tools to create, they will create. and they will share. Everything published in Dreams is allowed to be played or utilized by another player, which creates this atmosphere of collaboration, of learning, of growth that truly exemplifies the beauty of human society, a world in which competition is not hailed as the only true motivating force. I could not have created anything of worth if I could not outright steal, with permission, from these other creators. Character models, object models, sound effects, even logic like the over-the-shoulder camera was something I had to search up and copy how it was done, because at the time, Dream's native tools didn't allow for an easy over-the-shoulder camera. And for those who might later ask, yes, this is the reason why the camera in my video game can clip through walls. It's not programmed with any logic for avoiding obstacles. I don't know what Pokemon Violet's excuse is, though. For those pedants, or assholes, wondering what's the difference between this and straight up stealing, the key here is consent. People publish in Dreams knowing full well their creations can be remixed by others. There's a sense of collective ownership for the greater good of the platform, and in my experience, it's worked pretty well. You can be a designer, you can be a performer, you can be a musician or a creator or just a reviewer. There's a niche for you to fit snugly into the community. The terms of use updated with some confusing legalese, which might be a bit concerning, I'm not sure, and there was a big server switch heralding the inevitable end of Dreams as a service, but life and creativity find a way. Dreams is far from perfect, and I have my fair share of criticisms about the platform. I haven't thoroughly documented my issues with Dreams, so I'm just gonna list some issues off the top of my head. One, storage management. 2, memory limits. 3, disconnections. 4, no pathfinding automation. 5, physics break constantly. 6, lighting tools. 7, puppet limitations. 8, only human puppets. 9, gadgets like cameras lack certain functionalities like detecting when something is on screen. 10, censorship. So one of the biggest things I'm contending with are the severe memory limits in Dreams. For instance, when you create 2 separate scenes, you can link them together in a collection called a dream. When you use variables, you can make them persistent, which means their values carry over from scene to scene within that same dream. So if I have a variable called Emily_current health, and its value is at 85, when I go to the next map, the value of Emily_current health will still be at 85. But you can only have a total of, I believe, 128 persistent variables in any given dream. And at the time that I learned this, the game wasn't very clear about explaining that limit. I had to Google why suddenly none of the variable values were saving. Now, there are various math nerd ways around this limitation. The one I developed myself uses division and remainders to allow any given variable to store up to 8 binary values. So each digit corresponds to a different variable value. I could explain more, but I think that's good enough for now. The other memory limits come in the form of graphical memory and gameplay memory, which can cause a lot of stress when building a level. Copying and pasting complex things or having too many animations, puppets, or physics will greatly increase gameplay memory. And music used to take gameplay memory as well. Thankfully it doesn't anymore, or at least not as much. But it gets to the point where I feel like I simply can't make levels as interesting as I want with multiple monsters or sequences or fun animations because I keep hitting the memory ceiling. Graphics memory is even more frustrating in my opinion because it just makes no sense. Graphics memory pertains to the number of unique shapes in your level. It doesn't decrease when objects are invisible, and I don't know, sometimes deleting from a sculpture increases graphics memory, like a lot, and stretching out a structure can decrease graphics memory. Lowering sculpture detail is supposed to decrease graphics memory, but sometimes lowering sculpture detail can increase graphics memory. The problem with Libido is that Libido is expensive as all heck. Pretty much any map that Libido is on is at either 99 or exactly 100% gameplay memory or graphics memory, I can't remember. To the point that I can't have much else on any map that Libido is on. And now we're just gonna look at this map real quick. Quick zoom out here. Like look, 94% graphics memory. And this map is literally just Emily, Libido, and this. It's just this. It's not a lot of stuff. But all of that is 94% graphics memory. Some things from other creators use up so much graphics memory that they're basically unusable in any moderately complex scene. I know what you're thinking. Optimize. Trust me, I've tried. You can lower graphical detail to decrease graphics memory, and you can tweak things to have fewer cables to decrease gameplay memory, but I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm not a real game designer, but it would constantly feel like I had just gotten going when suddenly I'm hitting the ceiling for memory in my scene. It kills me that there hasn't been a next-gen update for this game, and now seemingly there never will be, to address these old-gen issues. Next up, storage management. Because at the time of writing, I was working on The Rite of Spring and making good progress and finally hit the storage ceiling that had been hanging over my head like an albatross since the announcement that Dreams would be losing support. While I can delete scenes and creations to make space for The Rite of Spring, creations are linked, so if I delete a version of something that is in a completely separate creation, the creation it's in goes private. When I first upgraded Waning to Sea of Flame, I started building on the old maps without separating or categorizing them, mainly because I didn't really have a process, and wound up deleting versions of the maps that were in Waning Vanilla without realizing. Dreams has some communication and interface issues. It tells you that deleting something that's in another creation will private what it's in, but it doesn't warn you when that's about to happen. So I deleted the creation thinking I'd get a pop-up saying, hey, this thing you made 3 years ago is stamped in this public creation and are you sure you want to fuck everything up? And like, nope. I had to find out via notification I received after the fact and didn't realize I had until about 30 minutes after I did the thing. Also, I have to delete things one at a fucking time, which takes literal hours. Each screen has different sorting options, so the creation screen doesn't allow me to sort from largest to smallest, and it only tells me the lead version that is the most up-to-date version stamped in a public project. But since two different versions exist, one for Sea of Flame and another for Waning Vanilla, it doesn't show me that there are two lead versions, only one for Sea of Flame, meaning I have to play this really scary game of roulette with what I choose to delete. The interface in general is like cute, but when you want to find something, like really find something, you have to scroll through these linear menus that are organized seemingly at random, and it can take forever and feel really annoying to have the information or creation you're looking for obfuscated by such a linear, laggy, and buggy menu. On that note, ever since Dreams lost support, the game will constantly disconnect from its own servers, making things like saving projects or deleting them or even building levels take so much longer as you wait for the game to reconnect. And I know it's not just my internet connection because I've seen it on other people's videos. Next issue, there are no gadgets or automation tools for pathfinding, and puppets can only follow one tag forever. So developing good pathfinding is a major pain in the ass. I was able to throw together something allowing my monsters to avoid walls and eventually reach the player sometimes, but it simply isn't consistent and its effectiveness depends heavily on the map design. There was one tool made by someone whose name I will flash on the screen because I don't have it right in front of me, and I used that for The Rite of Spring. But even that's like has its own limitations, and it's a great tool, but it would be really great if there was something built into Dreams where there was dynamic pathfinding potential for many different kinds of games. I mean, even most AAA titles have pathfinding issues, but this seems like something that would be ameliorated with some designated tools. Even if like puppets could simply toggle between what tags they automatically look at or follow, or there were some way for a tag to project itself over a specific distance or location, I could then create routes and paths that creatures know to travel before executing some other function. Animation keyframes are all bound to specific puppets, and therefore if the puppet and keyframe are ever separated, say you forgot to save them together and you try to move a keyframe you meticulously posed to a map after you've already placed the relevant puppet down, all the keyframe data will be lost. I get why this is. If they're separated, the keyframe has no puppet data to reference. But seeing as how most puppets are anthropomorphic, I wish there was some kind of retargeting system, even if it weren't perfectly accurate, which would help especially with transferring animations between characters who don't share the same base puppet, which is currently impossible. Yeah, there's two of them now. Because this one, this one is here, it's in the wall, and this was a prop from before. So in Waning 1.0, this silhouette is the one that chases you around. But because I didn't want to mess with any of its animations, after I overhauled all the shadows and their AI and whatnot, and animations, I added this one in, which spawns in after after the cutscene is over. So you pick it up, the cutscene plays, and then this one disappears, goes invisible, and then this one is the one that actually stalks you, because it has completely different animations and AI than the original silhouette did. There are no timescale gadgets. Timescale affects things like slow motion and fast motion, and a timescale gadget with options to allow for certain microchips or objects to not be affected would have made it very simple to program pausing into the game. Dreams has a built-in pause menu which stops all time, but if I wanted the player to be able to navigate my in-game items menu, for instance, I would have to have set up things in a very particular future-proofed way to ensure that animations, physics, and interactions properly stop when the menu is up, and I just didn't have the know-how at the time to figure that out. Honestly, I still don't, not without making the gameplay memory skyrocket. I find myself getting frustrated often that I can't rely on tags for certain gadgets. Like, I can't directly have a laser scope only respond when it hits the tag that it's aiming at. And I can't have an impact sensor only respond if it's being touched by an object with a specific tag. This one bugs me constantly. There's no simple way to have a camera detect when an object is on screen. Lights can't output a signal when they're hitting a specific object, and puppet cameras don't have depth of field settings, among other things. As I worked on the Rite of Spring, I was wishing there were more lighting tools. Light tends to bleed through objects, which is fine for smaller levels with more controlled environments, but when you have scenes with indoors and outdoor locations and complex layouts, it made me wish that there were gadgets like, I don't know, a light blocker or something that would prevent light from spilling into areas that it shouldn't, and just other objects to more finely tune world lighting than just the native light gadgets. There are no default non-human puppets with all the built-in procedural automation that the human puppets have. Searching for anything sucks major ass. I tried finding a specific version of my game once, and the version I was looking for straight up wasn't populating in this terrible list. Physics break constantly and are just frustrating to deal with, though this one I don't entirely blame Dreams for. And lastly, there's the censorship. Dreams is a rated T game, and it really doesn't want you using any naughty words. It will automatically censor words, acronyms, and segments that it deems inappropriate, even if they are used in the most innocent ways. For instance, if I have a tag called moth_current health, the tag's name will automatically correct to ****current health, because THC is a no-no term. This can and does fuck up tag behavior if you have two tags that autocorrect to the same name. It's fucking stupid. I can't use the word thorny because it has horny in it. I can't say fuck or shit, even though I'm pretty sure the official Media Molecule story Arch Dream, which released with Dreams on launch, has the word shit in it.
Oh, you're in for it now, you big
Why am I even searching for stupid shit like dragons anyway?
I can use the word sexy, but not sexier for some weird reason. So I have to use the grammatically frustrating more sexy to say the same thing but worse. It begins to feel incredibly frustrating and nerve-wracking when you spent 3 years working on a game with strong language and sexual themes, and you don't know if at any point some mod somewhere is going to pull the plug on it after it's released. This already happened with one Dreams game called House of Beavis, which featured suggestive and sexualized content. Media Molecule investigated and eventually reinstated the game, but the fact that this sort of thing was even possible creates this air of insecurity surrounding the whole platform. My stories are explicitly political. I like to push boundaries. I like for my stories to address meaningful human experiences like death and mental health and sexuality. I found a convincing way to circumvent the text censor, which I use in The Rite of Spring, and I also have outright nudity in that game, if anyone can really call a pair of female nipples nudity. Fucking prudes. It's 2025, for God's sake. I am very willing to push these boundaries, but I wish that Media Molecule didn't have so many boundaries that needed pushing. My game, Waning Sea of Flame, discusses sex and abuse and religion and death, and I wish I had a space to do all that in, which didn't run the risk of collapsing beneath my feet. Thankfully for now, Waning Sea of Flame is still up and accessible, and it's even been recognized by the community at Media Molecule. So allow me to immortalize it and The Rite of Spring, which is now done at the time of recording this, in case they're ever taken down or the Dream servers simply stop running.